Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and start, and if other
You need me to
people
press
come in,
got it?
oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if I should press got it.
I
Okay,
think
there
it's
we
just a
go.
notification that it's recording.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, I pressed it anyway. Oh.
cool. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We're super excited to have you here and super excited to be partnering with Haifa from Fufu's Kitchen. We think she has some really awesome things in store for you guys today. My name's Courtney, and I'm with the American Lamb Board, and the Lamb Board represents all U.S. sheep producers. And if you didn't know, lamb is actually produced in all 50 states in the U.S., so you can always get it fresh and available. And there's actually over 85,000 sheep producers in the U.S., which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
We're partnering with Haifa O'Day from Fufu's Kitchen, as I mentioned, and we've had the pleasure of working with her on some recipe development this year. And yeah, we're super excited to be partnering for the class. We obviously see that lamb sales skyrocket at this time of year because of Ramadan and Easter and Passover. So we definitely wanted to host this class to help demystify and decrease that intimidation around preparing a large piece of meat like a leg of lamb. So we hope you get that from this class today, and we hope you enjoy your time. Just a couple housekeeping things. This is a live session, so you can totally ask questions verbally if you'd like to. If you don't feel comfortable with that, you can go ahead and type them into the chat and I can relay them for you. We just ask if you're not asking a question that you please stay muted. Just keeps things a little bit cleaner. I don't know if you noticed, this is being recorded. If I'm doing this correctly, none of your faces should be recorded.
Hopefully.
You don't have to have your camera on. I just wanted to let you know. And then lastly, whoever's present on this call, this is the best part. We're going to be giving away a free leg of lamb at the end. So yeah, stick around. I have a random name generator and I'll just pick someone at the end. Yeah, and
Guys, oh, sorry.
you're okay. I'm just going to pass it
I'm
over.
I'm ready.
It's all you.
All right, cool. Actually, guys, I forgot that they're even doing a lamb giveaway. So I never even mentioned that. So that's awesome. At the end of this, if you stick around, which I hope you do, they are going to be giving away, I believe, a leg of lamb.
Yep.
So definitely stay tuned for that. So yeah, today I'm going to be showing you how to make a slow roast leg of lamb. And thank you, Courtney, for the intro. For those who don't know, I am Haifa, also known as Fufu. A lot of people actually call me Fufu, which is totally fine. My blog is fufuskitchen.com. I have a cookbook called Dine in Palestine, which I'm so proud of. And I'm really happy that you guys are all joining me here today so I could teach you how to make this beautiful roast, which, by the way, if you were to ask me 2 years ago, I was very intimidated to do. And this is why I actually really wanted to do this live, because it's actually quite simple. It's actually really easy. It's just a matter of a few things to prep, and then the rest is all the oven. You really don't have to do much, which is awesome about this. And then people always think that, you know, you put hours and hours into it, but you really don't. You maybe put 30 minutes and then the rest is all the oven. So I'm really excited to teach you how to do this today. Unlike maybe most recipes, I do both a dry rub and a wet marinade for my lamb. I'm all about the flavor, and you are not going to miss any flavor when it comes to this roast. Okay, so let's get started with a few things that I want to tell you about the leg of lamb, because that's really important. That's the first step, right? You're going to the butcher, you want to get a leg of lamb. You probably have questions. What should you look for, and size and whatnot? So I'm going to share that with you. So right here, I have what was a 9-pound leg of lamb, and you could see it has the shank attached to it too. Typically, when I go to the Arabi butcher, the halal butcher, they always include the shank. Sometimes when you go to a different butcher, they might not, unless you mention you want it with the shank. So that's just something to keep in mind. But I've never had that come up, but that's something I wanted to just let you guys know. Now go to a butcher that you trust so you know that you are getting great quality American halal lamb. If you didn't know, there is American lamb literally produced in every state. So you are getting the best quality lamb, and you are also supporting the ranchers and farmers who are taking care of the livestock and of the land. So that way, it's good for everybody. It's a win for everybody. So be sure to support halal American lamb. Now, you could also go on, you could also contact American Lamb Board, and they will tell you who is supplying halal certified lamb. So that's something to keep in mind if you eat zabih halal like myself. Okay, back to the lamb. So I went to the butcher and I wanted a 9-pound lamb, right? So I wanted 9 pounds. When you buy 9 pounds, you're not going to get 9 pounds. And I'll tell you why. Because the butcher, you're going to ask to trim off excess fat because lamb is a bit fatty. And although you want fat for your meat, which offers so much flavor and juiciness, you also don't want too much because the fat also gives a little gaminess. So you want like the right amount. And an experienced, trusted butcher will also know that. So you would ask your butcher, hey, could you please trim off some of the excess fat? And that's what they will do. The butcher actually trimmed off some of the excess fat, but you could see it's beautiful. It still has marbleization of fat throughout, which is what you want because it's going to make this lamb super juicy and the fat will give it flavor. You just don't want too much. So that's one thing that you want to ask for. Another thing, you can see here that this was cut off because it could have been longer. The leg, the butcher, you would ask him to cut the leg unless you have a pan that would fit that. Now I'm a little extra, and sometimes I'll bring my pan to the butcher and I'm like, make sure this fits because I'm not coming back and I'm not doing this at home. So I literally did that the other day. I brought my pans and I was like, make sure they fit, and they do. So you could ask for your butcher to cut the leg of lamb, trim it a little bit at the end to make sure that it will fit in whatever roasting pan that you have. Another thing I want to show you that the butcher did for me. And you don't necessarily have to do this, but it's something else that you can do just in case. He made a cut right here. And what that does, this is right above the shank. And what that does is it allows for me to kind of bend and move around the leg of lamb if I need that space. Let's say this didn't fit perfectly. By being able to move this part, it might fit better. So that's an extra step that you could also take, or you could ask of him to do. That shouldn't be a problem. And you could see here that I'm using a aluminum foil heavy duty pan. I've actually doubled this just to do so, but typically you could get away with just using one of these. And I also have a lamb roasting in the oven in a jumbo roasting pan. So it doesn't matter what you use, but make sure that it has some edges that are high up. Make sure that it's kind of covering the lamb. And it's important to do that from the beginning because you're going to marinate the lamb in the pan. Less mess, much easier for you, and it keeps all the flavor in that pan. And I actually like using aluminum heavy duty pans because less mess at the end. I don't have to clean a baking pan. And if you guys know, sometimes it could get a little bit greasy if the lamb fat sits in the pan. So either or works. I just wanted to get that out to you from the beginning. And now for the preparation of the lamb. So once you go to the butcher and you have all that handled, you are left with this gorgeous leg of lamb. And now you want to make a slow roast, right? First step is to make sure that it is completely dry. And then you want to season it with salt and pepper. Now, I like to use a flaky salt. That's what I prefer using for my red meats in general. Let's say I'm doing steak or lamb chops. I always like to use a flaky salt. And I also like to use cracked bell pepper. It has more flavor, to be honest with you, but table salt and ground black pepper will work just fine as well. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is season my lamb generously. So I'm going to show you right now. I'm literally going to season it all over. Now, I'm not going to focus so much at the bottom of the lamb, and I'll tell you why. Because all the flavor is going to seep to the bottom, and the bottom is going to get that flavor after this is cooked. So I only do like a little bit at the bottom. You don't have to be as generous. And the reason why I like to season my lamb with salt and pepper before adding my dry rub and adding my wet rub is to ensure the lamb itself is well seasoned, because sometimes seasoning or spices or rub mixtures, once you start cooking, not a majority, but some of that is released and you don't really get that flavor in that lamb. So you want to make sure you season the lamb first and then you add all that extra flavor. That way you ensure that this is well seasoned, right? So you can see here that it's seasoned nicely with the salt. And I'm gonna kind of just dab that in a little bit. And I'm going to do a little bit on this side, but like I said, not much. Just a little bit. Okay, perfect. Now I'm going to do some cracked bell pepper over the top as well. And I know that this is a little bit of an arm workout, but it's okay. It will yield better results. I don't know. I used to always use ground black pepper, but ever since just, using peppercorn and cracking myself, it's just so much better, honestly. You get that flavor much more pronounced in your meal. I can definitely feel it in my arms. And please, if you guys have any questions along the way, feel free to ask me. I'm here to help you and I will do my best. I might not know all the answers, but I'll always do my best to help you.
We actually do have a question. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, someone asked, is it important to pat dry the lamb before seasoning it?
Yeah, that way the seasoning could adhere to the lamb better. If the lamb was a little wet, it might not stick to it as much. But once it's nice and dry and you're able to rub it in, that's the focus, that seasoning mix. So I always recommend that, especially if you were to wash your lamb, always pat it dry first before proceeding. And that's what I do for all cuts of meat, just so you know. I always make sure it's patted dry. So I'm going to do the same now for here, just a little bit, not as much. So as I was saying before, this was a 9-pound leg of lamb. And when he trimmed off the excess fat, it became like 8.3. And I'll tell you why that's important later on in the live when it comes down to cooking times. Okay, salt, pepper, we're done. Now the next step is to use a sharp knife and you are going to make some cuts into the meat. Right? So I'm going to do about 8 to 9 cuts. So I'm just going to like sporadically do it. No exact location. And you want to make the cut big enough to have a garlic clove go in there and not fall out. So I have one, I'm doing another one here. Just want to kind of do it throughout the lamb.
There's one other question.
Yeah.
About salt type. Is there a difference in using different salt types, whether it be kosher, coarse, table?
Yeah, there is a difference in the salt that you use. So sometimes you have to watch out for table salt because it is much finer. So if you use the same amount of table salt as you do with a flaky salt, it might be overboard. So you have to be mindful of that. And the reason why I like using flaky salt is because it's a little more subtle, but it's also pronounced. And a coarse salt, I wouldn't really use it as much here. To be honest with you, I only use coarse salt to clean my cast iron because you need that grit almost to clean the cast iron. But for me, I really like to use a flaky salt. And like I said, everyone has table salt at home. So I get that if you don't have flaky salt and you want to use table salt, that is completely fine. Just when you're salting it, make sure you're not over salting it. That's the only thing to keep in mind. But lamb could also take it. Because it's such a big piece of meat, it will absorb some of that salt, but not all of it. So it's really hard to over salt lamb. Even with all this salt I'm putting on and then the dry rub and the wet rub, it's still not going to be like salty or anything, just so you have that in mind. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cuts. Okay, let me fill these cuts now with some garlic. So I have some garlic cloves here, and some of mine were really big, so I cut them in half or in quarters. And now I'm going to add my garlic right into the slits that we just made. And you might be thinking, why am I doing this? Well, garlic is amazing to start off. I love garlic. I put it in everything. This is something that my mom always did. And really, I think because when garlic roasts for a long time, it kind of just melts like butter into the meat and it just gives more flavor. This is all about optimizing flavor, right? So that is what we're doing here. And you can see they fit beautifully. I am going to do 2 more cuts. Let's see. Let's do one right into the shank and let's do another one here.
Do you
So
smash your garlic before putting it in or no?
No. So the garlic is literally a whole piece of garlic clove that I just cut in half or into quarters, depending on the size of your garlic. And then I just put it right in there because there's no need to smash it because it's literally going to melt after it's been cooking for 4+ hours. So you're just putting it like that. All right, so step 2 done. So easy, right? It's going so well. We are doing great because I know some of you are cooking alongside me. Okay, so this is done now. Now what we're going to do is make our dry rub. So the dry rub consists of a few spices that I like to use. This is typically found in most pantries. The first thing is allspice. So I have allspice here, and that is almost in every Middle Eastern home. We use it pretty often, especially for our red meats, whether ground beef or lamb. And then garlic powder. Garlic powder is a spice that I always have on hand and I use regularly. Cumin, some salt. See here, I'm using table salt. There's no need to use flaky salt in this spice rub. And then some onion powder, turmeric for a little bit of color, some black pepper, and cinnamon. Now, some of you might be thinking cinnamon and something savory. Yes. In Middle Eastern cooking, we actually use cinnamon often with our savory cooking. We even put it for chicken, for like chicken shawarma, beef shawarma, or in this case, lamb. The cinnamon really accentuates its flavor with this spice rub, and I highly recommend that you don't skip out on it. Even a little bit goes a long way. So now I'm just going to mix this all together, and this is going to make up our dry rub. Oh, and sorry, there's also smoked paprika in here. I totally skipped over the smoked paprika, but that's actually my favorite part. The smoked paprika adds a lot of flavor, especially if you're using smoked as opposed to regular paprika. Because of that smoky flavor, but you can definitely use regular paprika if that's all you have on hand. So this is what the mixture.
I'm sorry, is it all equal parts?
No, it's not all equal parts. So it's a tablespoon of allspice, half a tablespoon of garlic powder, half a tablespoon of onion powder, a teaspoon of cumin. Wow, I have this memorized. I'm proud of myself. Half a teaspoon of cinnamon, a quarter teaspoon of cumin, and then a teaspoon of salt. The recipe, by the way, is all up online. So that's why I didn't specify exactly how much, because the written recipe is actually on my website and it's also on the American Lamb Board's website. So you could easily get to that and print it out as well. So now I am going to just add my spice rub just like this. Okay, you just want to add it right over the lamb, trying to get the top and the sides mainly. Like I said, don't worry too much about the bottom. And if it goes into the pan, that's completely fine too, because we're going to add liquid to this pan. So that's just going to season up the liquid that the lamb is going to cook in. And you want to keep about a spoonful of spice rub left, because we're going to add that into the wet marinade too. So now I'm going to use my hands and I'm going to kind of just massage the dry rub it in. Let it adhere to the lamb as much as you can. You could grab some that were on the sides. It smells so good. That little bit of cinnamon, you could really smell it. It really goes a long way. Okay, I am happy with this. You could tell it's well seasoned with the dry rub. And now on to the wet rub, right? So we seasoned it with the salt and pepper. We added our garlic cloves in there. We did our dry rub, and now we want to work on our wet marinade. You can go to fufuskitchen.com for the recipe. I'll also mention that at the end because the side dishes that you could pair with this dish are also all on my blog. So you can make the complete meal and not have to worry about what sides go with this, which we'll talk so much more later about towards the end when I show you the beautiful roast that's in the oven. Okay, dry marinade done. So now we are going to move over here where I am going to make the wet marinade in my food processor. Okay, perfect, Courtney. Okay. All right, so for the wet marinade, you need a few ingredients, and I'm going to show you. You need tomato. So on my recipe card, I put half a tomato, but here I'm using a small tomato, so you could get away with just using a small ripe tomato. If it was a larger tomato, I'd say half is more than enough, but a small tomato, you could use the whole thing. So that's the first thing I'm going to put in my food processor. And the tomato is not only going to add juiciness, and that acidity will help break down the meat, but it's also going to give that beautiful color that you like on a leg of lamb. So when this comes out, it's just going to look gorgeous. You're also going to want to add some bell pepper. This is one that you could omit if, let's say, you don't have bell pepper on hand. That's totally fine. Now, I'm using only half. That's all you really need. And I recommend that you use a colored bell pepper rather than green. So red, yellow, orange, as opposed to green, because the green is a little bit more bitter, while the colored is sweeter. And then you want to add a whole onion. The onion really gives flavor. That is a must. And then, of course, more garlic. So I have about 6 to 8 garlic cloves in there. Honestly, the more garlic, the better in my book. I start with 6, but if there's 8, it's fine with me. And then a 1/3 cup of olive oil. This just helps blend it all together. And then I have 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. The paste is concentrated, right? The tomato flavor is concentrated, and also the color will be concentrated on the meat. So this is all you need for the wet marinade, except that dry rub. So you also want to add that dry rub that is left over. Nothing is going to go to waste. This is all going to be flavored nicely. Just clean off my hands. Okay, so I'm going to pulse this. Sorry if it's a little loud. Okay, so I pulsed it for a few seconds, and this is what it should look like. I'm going to bring it to the center for you guys to get a good look. So this is what it should look like. And now I'm going to use most of this to coat my leg of lamb. You're probably not going to need all of it. You actually won't need all of it. Some of it is going to go to the stock that is the lamb is going to cook in. But I am going to take out my blade. And now I'm going to add this wet marinade over the top. That's a great question. Do I ever add yogurt? I personally don't add yogurt, but you definitely can if you want. Some people do add yogurt, and it works out fine for them. I've had people add yogurt to even my recipe, and it worked out great for them. So you could definitely add yogurt if you like, but I don't find it necessary, so I just don't. So I'm just, you could see, putting it over the top and kind of dabbing it in, massaging it into the meat. And I actually have a roast going right now in the oven, and it smells so good in here. You could really smell all these flavors. Yeah, so I added salt and pepper, the garlic cloves in the slits, and then I added that dry rub, and now the wet rub. Does that answer your question, I think? Oh, okay, yeah. So on the bottom, I only seasoned it with a little bit of salt and pepper, and not the dry rub and the wet rub. And the reason why is because it's really not necessary. this rub, while it bakes, when it roasts, it's gonna fall to the bottom of the pan and get the bottom. So without you putting an extra effort, it's going to be juicy and flavorful because all these drippings are going to go to the bottom of the pan and coat the bottom of the pan. So you don't necessarily have to add dry rub and wet rub. I mean, if you want to, go ahead, but some of this wet rub is going to go into the stock, which it's going to cook in, which is at the bottom. So you really don't need to. And I didn't do it here. I just did the edges and the top. Okay, so this is good. I am happy with this. It seems to be covered fully. Okay, perfect. Now I'm just going to wash my hands really quick, and then I'm going to show you what we're going to do with the remainder of the wet rub.
Someone asked if you would ever put the wet rub first and then a dry rub.
I mean, you can, but to me, it's, I guess, a little bit more, it just makes more sense to me to put the dry rub after the salt and pepper because it'll adhere better to the meat as opposed to putting the wet rub and then the dry rub, because the wet rub, some of it is going to come off. So then that seasoning you put on top of it is also going to come off. Does that make sense? So it's better to put the dry rub after the salt and pepper. Okay, so this step is done, but now we have some wet rub left. Not much. I'd say about 1/4 to 1/2 cup. So what we're going to do with this is add it to some water. Just going to move this out of the way. Just give me a little bit more space. Okay. Okay. Good. I'm glad it makes sense to you. Perfect. So this I'm going to add to some water. Now I have about 1.5 to 2 cups of water here. And this water is what's going to go at the bottom of the pan before I roast my lamb. And there's a few reasons why we add water to the pan. I know some people don't, but the reason why I do it is because, first of all, it does add a little bit more flavor to the meat that's at the bottom. Secondly, it also acts as a way to steam the meat and heat it up evenly and more thoroughly. And it also, it's also just more flavorful. And you don't want the fat of the lamb to come at the bottom of the pan and then scorch the pan. I'm sure some of you have seen that before. I've seen it before where I cooked lamb and then the bottom is just like, almost looks like charcoal, like scorch. And that's because the fat at a high temperature for so long, it's going to look burnt. So this kind of prevents that too. So, and I like to also spoon over the extra sauce at the end on top of my lamb. So this is why I add this. And you know what? I'm actually going to add this at the end. You don't need to add this now. First, I want to show you, I want to put on top my bay leaves and my cardamom. These are aromatics that I'm going to be using to literally give my lamb a beautiful aroma, right? So I have about 6 bay leaves here. I just, like I said, put it sporadically, no given order. And then the same for cardamom. I have some cardamom here, and this will remove after it bakes. You wouldn't serve it with the bay leaves and cardamom on top. They're strictly just for a beautiful aromatic flavor to your lamb. And in Middle Eastern cooking, we actually use bay leaves and cardamom a lot for that purpose. We could add cinnamon sticks. I mean, we already put cinnamon in the dry rub, but if you wanted a more pronounced cinnamon aroma or flavor, you could definitely put some cinnamon sticks, 1 or 2. I wouldn't put more than that, maybe even just stick to 1, depending on the size of the stick. Okay, so this is basically done, guys. You just prepped a leg of lamb and it looks gorgeous, right? So all this is going to add a beautiful color to your lamb. And now what I want to do is cover my lamb. I'm going to show you how to properly cover your lamb, because this is a big, it's a big deal when you're cooking your lamb to have it properly covered, because you want to retain that heat, right? And one thing that I do is I create a barrier for my lamb, and I do that with parchment paper. Okay, so I have a piece of parchment paper, and what I'm going to do is literally cover my lamb with the parchment paper just like this. Super easy. This is going to be the barrier between that and then the aluminum foil, right? So the aluminum foil would be about 3 layers worth because you really want to retain that heat. If you have a heavy duty aluminum foil, you could probably get away with 2 layers, but I'm going to do 3 because mine's a little bit thinner. So the first step is to add that parchment paper to cover your lamb. Something I wanted to make note of here. There's 2 things that you could do. So ideally you want to marinate your leg of lamb overnight, right? But I know some people don't have that time, and that's totally fine. You could also marinate it 4 to 6 hours ahead of time. But either way, it has to sit in the fridge and marinate. So what I would recommend doing is what I'm doing exactly here. You have it rubbed and all the marinades on top. You cover it with the parchment paper. Now we have this liquid, right? So for instance, I'm not making this leg of lamb till tomorrow. I'm prepping it now to enjoy tomorrow. Do I need to put in this stock right now? No, you don't. If you want to, you can pour this stock right into the pan and make sure that it covers half an inch of the entire pan, the base of the pan, half an inch to an inch. Just make sure it covers the entire pan, right? Or you can do so right before roasting. And that's what I prefer. I usually cover this up and I put it back in the fridge. And before I cook my lamb, like tomorrow when I take it out and I want to cook it, I will pour the lamb, the stock right into the corner. I just lift up my aluminum foil and my parchment and I would just pour it right into the pan. But like I said, you don't have to do that. That's 2 options, completely up to you, whatever works for you. So I'm going to be covering this liquid for now, and I'm going to use it tomorrow. But if you wanted to, you could definitely add it now. Just make sure it covers the base of your pan. If you have to add more water, then add more water. That's completely fine. Now I'm going to show you how to cover with the aluminum foil.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Would you ever recommend using like a stock or a broth instead of water?
I mean, you can definitely do that. I actually like to use vegetable stock. I feel like it has a lot of flavor. So if you have that on hand, go for it. Use vegetable stock. The only reason why you could really, and that's what I use typically when I'm cooking stock, because it has more flavor. But the reason why it's not that important to use here is because you're already adding so much flavor to the water. It's not like you're just pouring water. You know what I mean? If you were just pouring water, I'd say, okay, if you have vegetable stock, go with vegetable stock. But because you're going to have extra marinade and that flavor, you're totally fine. You could get away with using that as opposed to vegetable stock and that.
Gotcha.
And I believe somebody asked if I'd ever put pomegranate molasses in the marinade. And yes, I would. I love pomegranate molasses. So if you love it, go for it. Don't put too much. Maybe 1 to 2 tablespoons because it is more pronounced. It is potent, but you could definitely do that. So I'm going to cover my lamb. And as I said before, I'm going to do 3 layers of aluminum foil. And the reason why is because you really want to do your best to retain that heat in the pan for the lamb. So that's 1. If you did have a heavier duty one, I know there's heavy duty aluminum foil for like smoking meat and stuff. You can definitely get away with 2. But your average aluminum foil, I would definitely do 3. Just as a precaution. You didn't go through all this effort, right? So you might as well. And honestly, I was always intimidated cooking this cut of meat because it's not inexpensive, and especially if you're going to serve it to a crowd, you don't want it to not come out right. So I totally get the hesitation that most people have when cooking lamb, but I hope that this is helping you see that it's really not bad. It's actually pretty simple. You just have to make your little marinades and you are good to go. So now to talk a little bit about cooking times, right? That's one of the biggest things here, right? You already prepped your meat and now you're going to give it to the oven and let it do its thing. but you need to make sure that you are setting the oven to the proper temperature and keeping track of time. That's literally all you have to do after you've done this step. So I'm going to take you through what I'm going to do, right? So this is a 8 to 8.5 pound lamb. And I am going to put this in my fridge. I'm going to let it marinate overnight because that is ideal. If you have 4 to 6 hours, that's it. You could totally do that. But you get more flavor the longer it sits, right? So I'm going to put this in my fridge. Tomorrow, I will take it out an hour before starting to bake. And the reason why you want to take out, and this is something I do for all my red meats, even steak and lamb chops, whatever it might be. The reason why you want to take it out an hour before, at least 30 minutes before, but because this is a bigger cut of meat, I'd say an hour is good, is because you want your meat to get to room temperature before you start roasting it. You don't want to roast your meat from from the fridge straight into a hot oven because the muscles will tense up. If you want a tender piece of meat, try that tip. It really does help. Take it out an hour before you plan to roast it. If you plan to roast it at 1, take it out from 12 and put it on your countertop and just let it sit before putting it in the oven for an hour. That way the muscles are relaxed in the meat and it's going from room temperature to hot as opposed to cold to hot where it'll tense up. You know, think about it. Even as humans, like the same thing. When we go outside in the cold, right away we tense up, our muscles tense up. It's the same exact thing. So you want to make sure that the meat is tender beforehand, and by bringing it to room temperature, that is just one step to doing so. And now cooking time and temperature. So I like to start off by cooking my lamb at 450 degrees. And I started off hot, and that just locks in all the flavor. And then I slowly roast it for 4+ hours, depending on the size, the weight, which we'll get to right now. I will lower the temperature the remaining amount of time. So it would be 450 to start the first hour, no matter what size the lamb is, and then 350 after that hour. So at the 1 hour mark, make sure that you put on your phone an alarm or reminder that you need to go lower the settings on your oven. You don't want it to be on 450 for 5 hours. It might scorch the lamb, right? We want it to cook nice and low and slow. So 450 first hour, 350 the remaining hours. Now, how do you figure out how many hours do I have to cook the lamb? That was something that always intimidated me too. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to do this all right. And then I'm just going to mess it all up in the oven, right? Really simple, actually. Use this tip. Each pound is about 35 to 40 minutes. Okay, so for each pound, you need 35 to 40 minutes of cooking time. So that's something to keep in mind. So for instance, for my 8-pound lamb, I need 5.5 hours and I'd be good. Right? So the way you would do that math, and I'm not great at math, okay? That was one of the subjects I did not love. So don't come at me if I make a mistake. But for instance, for 8 pounds of lamb, you would multiply that by 40 minutes. Whatever you get there, you would divide it by 60. Okay, because 60 minutes in an hour. So then it will tell you how many hours you need to cook the lamb. And always the first hour, 450, and the remaining 350. So the one that I have in the oven now only needed 4.5 to 5 hours because it's a 6.5 pound lamb. This one is 8.5, so it's going to need at least an extra hour. So I hope that helps in understanding. So 40 minutes for a fall apart. You know, lamb, you could cook to whatever temperature you prefer, but for a slow roast fall apart lamb, where it literally just comes right off the bone, my favorite thing, then you want to keep that in mind, 40 minutes per pound. So I hope that helps you. Another thing I wanted to mention, actually, that because that is something that really intimidates people, not knowing how to properly cook lamb, the American Lamb Board actually has on their website something super helpful. They have cooking times for different cuts and different, like, if you like it rare, if you like it medium, if you like it medium well, whether it's bone-in lamb, boneless leg of lamb, lamb chops. I was literally looking at it earlier today, and it's so helpful. It's everything, and they even tell you what temperature. So if you have a meat thermometer, that's great. To check the internal temperature as well. But I always follow the rule of 40 minutes for a slow apart leg of lamb per pound, and it always works out perfectly for me. Are there questions?
I can relay them. The first one is
Okay.
how many people would an 8-pound leg of lamb feed?
That depends who you're asking. I mean, okay, so I have a 6.5-pound lamb in the oven now, and it's literally just me and my husband, and we have a toddler. But my husband, if you just put that lamb in front of him, he'll literally probably pick at it all day. He loves lamb. He just loves meat. He's a meat guy. So it really depends. But I would say, to be on the safe side, an 8-pound lamb could feed, I'd say, 6 adults. And that's just like my friends. Like, I know how we are. And we really love lamb. And it depends. If you have side dishes, other protein, it really just depends. So it's just give or take. You have to kind of know the crowd. How much do they eat? You know what I mean? So that's what it really depends on. If I was doing it for 3 of my husband's hungry carnivore friends, that's it, 3 of them, and we're good. It's not going to feed more. So it really just depends. Were there any other questions?
Yep. Someone asked if they're looking for like an internal temperature here. What would you recommend?
I would do over 175, 175 being the minimum. Anything after that, you should be fine. But to be honest with you, I personally don't check. That's just something that I've read online. I personally don't check with the temperature for this, because the rule that I always follow always works. Which is the 40 minutes per pound. But I also have read in the past that 175 is what you're looking for a well done to fall apart lamb. So that's something to also keep in mind.
Okay, cool. And then last question is, can you do chops this way in the oven?
Like lamb chops? I'm
Yeah.
guessing lamb chops.
Yeah.
Yeah. So lamb chops, to be honest with you, I find, so every piece of meat has the best way of cooking it, right? It's not always, like you wouldn't cook a leg of lamb on top of the stove. Really, like most people wouldn't do that. They'd usually cook it in the oven because it's probably best in the oven. For lamb chops, I find searing it on a hot cast iron for literally 5 minutes on each side will yield that crusty outside that you love on a lamb chop, but still be super juicy. So that is my preferred method for lamb chops. You can sear it in the cast iron, both sides, then put it in the oven, but it'll literally take like 10 minutes in the oven. So I don't know if it's worth, turning on the oven for that, when you could just do it on the stovetop in a cast iron. Especially with a cast iron, it just locks in that flavor when you sear it like that. I highly recommend it. It tastes amazing. Or grilling. I wouldn't really bake lamb chops personally.
Okay, one other question. With the wet rub, would you add lemon juice or vinegar or like some type of like acid?
You can. Yeah, you definitely can. So for me, the acid is the tomato. I have tomatoes and I have tomato paste. I have seen recipes where you could add vinegar, but I wouldn't overboard the vinegar. A tablespoon will go a long way. And you could also do like half a lemon's juice for sure. But you don't have to worry about that gamey. I know some people like to add that because of gaminess in lamb. But you don't have to worry about that here. You will not taste any gaminess. This is super flavorful with the wet rub and the dry rub. And like I said, when you get a good quality American lamb cut of meat, you don't really have to worry about that. Especially when some of the fat is trimmed off, because you do want some fat. Most of the gaminess actually comes from the extra fat on the lamb. So once you have that trimmed, you don't have to worry so much about that. But to answer your question in short, yes, you could totally add lemon juice and you could totally add vinegar.
I also just wanted to mention that you're using the word gamey. Sometimes that's associated with lamb, but usually people are eating imported lamb. And most Australian lamb is like 100% grass-fed, and most American lamb is grass-fed, grain finished for a couple weeks, and it's that grain finishing that takes that like
there you go, that makes a difference.
Yeah, so American lamb is known for being a bit milder.
And I think I saw somebody talk about lamb shoulder. That's all I caught.
Yeah, they said I would recommend a shoulder roast with this recipe as well.
Yeah, no, lamb
Less
shoulder would go
expensive.
really well. Yeah, that's true. It is less expensive. Actually, I use lamb shoulder in all my Middle Eastern stews. So okra stew, cauliflower stew, meklube, which is our Palestinian upside down rice dish. We always use cuts of lamb shoulder. It is more inexpensive and it's also really delicious. It's just something about the look of a leg of lamb on the center of your table that just, I don't know, just ties it all in together and everyone gets so excited when they see it. Okay, so back to the lamb. I have it now. We figured out the time. We're all good. We're just going to take an hour before, and then we're going to put it in the oven to cook. And I actually have the lamb in the oven now, and I smell it, and it's telling me, come get me, because I'm ready. So I am going to show you what the end result will look like. And I'll do that right now. I'm going to move this lamb to the side because I'm going to refrigerate this later, but I need to make sure there's room in my fridge. And I don't know if there is at the moment. So I'm just going to move it to the side. And I am going to put this trivet right here to get my lamb. So this has been cooking for about 4.5 to 5 hours. And I'll close my oven right now. So we'll see together if it's fork tender, falling apart as I promised, right? Okay, so it might be a little bit smoky. So I'm just going to use my hands. You could see the steam is starting to come up. Perfect. Let me show you something. So remember how I was telling you about the bottom of the pan being scorched? So some edges that maybe didn't get as much water, you will see it's scorched, but here it's not. And that's totally fine. It's not a big deal at all. Some of the scorching is from the fat, and it's also from the components that are in the wet marinade. So don't worry about that because you're not serving that, right? So I just want to show you here. Ooh, this is hot. It's gorgeous. So this is a 6.5 pound, 6.3 leg of lamb. And you could see as it cooks, it reduces down even more, right? So it's become smaller. It's shrunk because some of that fat that left. And where's my fork? Okay, so I want to show you, I'm literally not doing anything. It's falling apart, right? My favorite part is, look, the lamb shank is literally falling apart. So I'm going to actually put this on a serving dish. I just wanted to show you how tender it is. And you could smell the bay leaves. You could smell the cardamom. And like I said, don't worry about the scorching. That is completely fine. And actually, it's more than likely because of what's in the wet marinade. But there are parts, and I'll show you right now with my spoon, to this that are still like the liquid that you would just pour over the lamb at the end. You would just tilt the pan and then pour it on top because we don't like to let anything go to waste. I'm just going to grab my serving dish, make some space. So I like to top this off with a garnish of toasted nuts and so almonds, slivered almonds typically, and parsley. Parsley adds that beautiful greenery, and the nuts add a little bit of crunch. And I'll tell you what I typically serve this with now, but for the purpose of the live, I just did the lamb. Okay, so this is probably going to fall apart because it's literally fall apart tender, but let's get at it. I already see the lamb shank has fallen apart. This is really hot. Okay. Let me put it on a surface that is not moving as much. That way, it's easier when the pan moves. And this is perfect for Ramadan, for iftars. So right now I'm observing Ramadan. So I'm fasting, and this is going to be our dinner. Bismillah. Okay. Wow, everything, it's literally falling apart, which is what you want. So this is perfect to feed a group of people. And Also great for Easter or Passover, where you often will have a roast. So I want to show you now. Okay, perfect. Here is the gorgeous leg of lamb. I'm going to take some of this and just put it over the top. Okay. I'm gonna get this out of the way now. And then we're gonna talk a little bit about what I would typically serve this with. Because unlike my husband, who would literally just eat the entire thing like this and not care about any sides, I care about sides. To me, I have to enjoy it with a side. So some of the sides that I would do with this would be, I would put it on top of a bed of vermicelli rice or uzi rice. So in my blog post, you will see that I put it on top of uzi rice, which is basically a Middle Eastern rice that consists of carrots and peas. And it adds just a lot of flavor and has a little bit of seasoning of 7 spice in there. So imagine this on top of a bed of rice. And then I like to pair it with a cucumber yogurt salad on the side, an Arabic salad, similar to like a tzatziki, and then just a fresh salad. And then you could also do like roasted potatoes and carrots. That's also really great. Those are some common sides that go with this. And you can get the recipe for all the sides on my website, fufuskitchen.com. I'm glad to hear that. So before I forget, we need to take off the bay leaves, right? So we need to take off the bay leaves because you don't want to eat a piece of bay leaf. So take off the bay leaf, take off the cardamom. If you could find them. Oh, that's garlic. Okay. We don't want to take the garlic. Okay, perfect. I don't see any more, but even if you miss some, it's okay. Oh, here it is. Okay, now I would just add some fresh parsley. And some beautiful toasted slivered almonds over the top. And then this is done. And I'm going to show you again the consistency of this because that's really what this is all about. So my mom loves the lamb shank. Like that is her piece. Nobody grabbed that piece if my mom was at the dinner table. And you could see it's just literally right off the bone. And somebody just asked, should we let it rest? I would always recommend letting your meat rest for about 5 minutes at room temperature before cutting into it, before eating it. And typically that's what's going to happen because this is just so hot right now anyway. I wouldn't recommend eating it right off the bat. So let it rest for a few minutes. But for the purpose of this live, I just wanted to show you, how fall apart tender that is. And it's literally calling my name, but I have to wait another hour to eat. So in an hour, I will enjoy you. And I want to show you the bottom, right? Because some of you might have been concerned about the bottom. Is it going to get that flavor? Well, look, you see all that flavor at the bottom. That is like super juicy. So you don't have to worry about that. And you see how the garlic has melted. Oh, let me show you. The garlic has literally melted into the meat. So it adds just like so much flavor. You really cannot go wrong. Yeah, I hope that you guys enjoyed watching me make this leg of lamb and that you feel less intimidated and you're going to tag me in all your creations when you make it. It's really that simple. It's not hard and it's beautiful and people always love it. It's made with love and you taste it. So yeah, I hope that you guys enjoyed. You can definitely get the recipe on fufuskitchen.com. It's under slow roast leg of lamb. And in that blog post, I have all the details, as well as all the sides and their hyperlinks as well. So you could find everything there. But please, if you guys have any remaining questions, I would love to take them or comments because I can't really read everything, but I did see some stuff come through.
I just want to say thank you. That was amazing. The only downside about virtual classes is we can't taste it.
Right?
I'm hungry too.
I know. I wish I could feed you all.
I'm gonna go ahead and pick a winner for the leg of lamb though. So I have everyone's name in like a random generator, and I'm gonna go ahead and do that.
You guys are welcome. I'm glad you guys enjoyed. If you have any remaining questions that I couldn't get to in this live, you could always message me and I always do my best to answer. So you could definitely contact me on my social media. My Instagram is at Fufu in the kitchen, or you could contact me through my blog at Fufu's Kitchen.
All right, we have a winner. It is Amanda Assad, and I'm gonna send you an email
Amanda,
today.
girl, Amanda, I better see the leg of lamb at that dinner table, okay?
I'm so excited. Thank you so much. I'm planning to make this for an iftar in a few weeks. So this is
Awesome.
perfect.
Okay. Amanda, you could just hit me up and I got you too if you have any extra
Thank you.
questions
Oh my
along
God,
the
I'm so
way.
excited.
All right, Amanda, I'll send you an email after we get off of here and we can work that out. But thank you guys all for joining us. I hope you had a good time.
Yeah, thank you guys. I'm so happy that you guys are all here to see this and I hope it helped you guys out. Thank you, Courtney, for having me, and American Lamb. Check them out. Learn more about how American Lamb can benefit you and you can help benefit the ranchers and farmers who put in so much work and effort.
Awesome.
Thank you
so
both.
much.
Bye. You
guys.
are welcome. Take care, guys. It's the star, right?